As Saga Briggs reminds readers in her recent blog post entitled 20 Things Educators Need to Know About Digital Literacy Skills, quote, current undergraduates have never known a life without the internet. So we've gotten to that point now where current undergraduates have never been without it. So more and more educators are finding that it is necessary to include digital and media literacy skills in their curricula. Some of Briggs's tips for an educator of the digital age include the following. Teach students to read past the first page of Google results. Encourage students to use email and Skype to reach authors of articles they read or some of the key players mentioned in the article. And consult 2, preferably 3, competing sources prior to drawing a conclusion. It is the final tip that raises the question of media literacy. Whereas digital literacy is to do with using digital technologies to foster and aid critical thinking skills, media literacy is to do with understanding media's role in society and questioning the variety of media streams that exist today. Here to help us better define media literacy and to understand its significance is Michelle Ciulla Lipkin, Executive Director of the National Association for Media Literacy Education, or NAMELY. Good morning, Michelle. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the distinction between digital literacy and media literacy. I made an attempt to categorize the two in the introduction, but I'm thinking you can shed more light for us.
Well, I just have to say, before I shed light, that I'm so impressed with that little intro. I was a big smile because you got a lot of things very right. That's awesome, and I really think it's great that you guys are giving some time to this topic. It's obviously the thing that I love to talk about the most, so it's great when other people want to talk about it with me. The way that we define media literacy, a lot of people will define it a little bit differently, but in general, this is the definition of media literacy, is the ability to access, analyze, create, evaluate, and act using all forms of communication. So when we think about media literacy, we really look at expanding the concept of traditional literacy to all media available in the 21st century. So the distinction between media literacy and digital literacy, it's not that different. The way that we do media literacy, though, is that it doesn't necessarily need to be digital. So we consider still books as media, and that would really be the only distinction. If you look at media literacy as the umbrella literacy, then things like digital literacy, news literacy, information literacy would be subcategories of media literacy. It really is the same. The intent of them are the same, is to make sure that all of us are literate in the society in which we live in today, which, as you mentioned, especially with the college students that are probably listening on the radio now, they've never known a different kind of world. So our mission is really to work with educators and to work with higher ed places to make sure that media literacy is a priority.
Right, and as one of the older college students, as someone in his mid-30s who is reminded of that constantly by people like Rebecca and Andrew and the rest of our crew.
That's not true.
No, it is. I walk in and they're like, hey, old man, where's your cane?
No.
However, as someone who is, fairly media savvy, but from an older generation where I remember not having the internet. I remember having dial-up to begin with when I was in maybe middle school, high school, something like that. I remember those days of getting the America Online CD in the mail every week. I why do we need 50 CDs for your program? Anyway, the thing that I've noticed, just from my perspective, is that the students, as you said, all media savvy. Some of the professors in college, and I imagine some of the teachers in high school, who are even older than I am, as hard as that may be believe for some people like Rebecca and Andrew, that there are people older than me. I'm telling you, they constantly remind me.
That would be me. I'm older than you. So just
there you go.
Let's be transparent here. Yeah.
So, I've seen in a class that I had this past semester, I am a student here, where there was an online portion of it. I think the students had a better grasp of that online portion than the professor did. Yes. What do you guys do to try and help with that and try to assist with people who, for the majority of their lives, did not have internet access, did not have this digital media to work with? How do you make such a significant change in their profession? How do we do that?
Well, one point I want to make is that there is a distinction between being technically savvy and media literate, and I think that's an important distinction to make. And you bring up like the perfect example, but I would say it's probably even more prevalent or noticeable with the younger set. I have a 10 and a 12-year-old at home, and they might be very technically savvy, like they know how to use the media, but they don't necessarily have the ability to access, like evaluate it, understand it. And I think that's really where the educators need to come in. I think that we could spend a lot of time focused on getting educators to be as technically advanced as their students, but I'm not sure if that's where we should be spending our time. I think it should be the other way. It should be the professors and the educators pushing their students to be more media literate. So using the critical thinking skills, using you can teach media literacy without technology. You can talk about magazines, you can talk about books, you can talk about newspapers. So I think that it's kind of a balance. Yes, we want our educators to be aware and be familiar with the technology that their students are using, but we get in a little bit of a problem because technology is always changing, right? So we are always going to be catching up with technology, but media literacy skills are really consistent. No matter what the technology is, media literacy skills are the same. Does that make sense? So it's like the focus of, I think we make a mistake a lot in thinking that people that are technically savvy are media literate. Those are different things. You can know how to create a website. You might not understand the sources that you need in order to build an accurate website. You might not understand who your audience is going to be. You might not understand how people will perceive the opinions that you present on your website. That's really the distinction that we try to make. And so, we also, in some ways, we're a membership organization. That's probably something that I should explain, the National Association of Media Literacy Education. So we're a membership organization, and our members are K through 12 educators, they're higher ed educators and students. They're also non-traditional educators, people that are doing like after-school work with kids or camps with kids. And then we have a lot of media makers that really just care about how media and how technology is being used in the classroom space or in an education space. So a lot of what we're talking about right now is what we talk about all the time, and where do we focus our energy? And for us, it's really, really focused on getting media literacy skills in the classroom. I do a lot of work with parents also, and part of the frustration with parents is very similar to what we were talking about trying to keep up with the kids, right, in technology. And that's really hard because the moment you think you have kind of control, or the moment you understand Facebook, they go to Twitter, and the moment they're done with Twitter, they're going to Instagram. So we're like constantly trying to catch up, which is why I'm not sure that that's the most effective use of our time.
Thank you for that clarification, because one of my questions, but you've answered it, was going to be how much of media literacy education is reactive as opposed to proactive. But it sounds like the being tech savvy might be reactive or catch up, but that media literacy education, like you said, is the skills will translate to all these different forms as they change. So that's really good.
And I think it's important, as you noted, that younger people seem to pick up on this stuff so fast. I have a 19-month-old who can get into my phone and change settings. He doesn't know what settings he's changing, but the fact that he can get into it, if I were his age and this technology showed up, I don't know that I would have done the same thing. I may have been more like one of the apes at the beginning of 2001: A Space Odyssey, like hitting it with a bone. I don't know, but it's just shocking to me how even an infant in these days seems to just inherently know, like, oh, this is a touchscreen, I can touch it. He tries to touch the screen of my laptop to make it do things. It's not a touchscreen. He doesn't understand that because mommy's laptop is a touchscreen, so why isn't daddy's? I mean, if things are moving so fast, is there any hope for the older people who don't have all this ability yet? I mean, is there a basic baseline that everybody can get to, do you think? Or are there some people that are just, it's passed them by and it's too late?
Well, I think that you need to give, first of all, I think you need to give yourself more credit. And I think you need to give the older folks a little bit more credit. I think that, but the story you just told about your 19-month-old, though, I do need to say that the bottom line is that is one of the reasons why media literacy education is so important, and it's so important at a very, very early age. So I would encourage parents and I would encourage educators to do what they can to understand the technology their kids are using, certainly, but to not let how can I put this in a way? Like, you can't let our kids know that we don't know what they know. You know, you have to fake it till you make it, and you have to have faith that you've gotten to a point in your life and you really can. You even if you don't understand the way that they understand the technology, you do have the thinking skills, you have the life experience, you have the ability to really talk about the choices kids and students are making with technology. So I think you have to use that. Even if you don't understand the technology, you use your experience in life and in the classroom to really talk to students about this. I think that, you know, the idea that we do have toddlers and we do have young students on tablets and you know, anywhere you walk, I live in New York City, and anywhere you walk, the kid is, you know, in the stroller with the iPhone of their parent, right? They're on screens all day. That is why it's more and more important for us to be having these conversations and for these issues to be addressed at a very young age and throughout the course of the, you know, a child's education. So by the time that they're in university, they've really had a lot of experience in media literacy education, really talking and learning about analyzing and evaluating what we're doing with communication. Now, the thing that is so powerful about media today is that we're now the creators. So it wasn't that long ago where we were just passive consumers, right? We were just it was just a consume relationship with media. And now we have this amazing opportunity where we're all creating media. Every time we tweet, every time we take a picture and post on Facebook, we're media creators. But we need to understand what that means, and we need to understand, you know, the choices that we're making. And I think in the intro or at some point before I got on, you guys were talking about social media, and, you know, there's so many issues with social media and privacy, and these are the conversations we need to be having. I just had the conversation yesterday with my daughter, who wanted me so badly to post a video she did on YouTube, and I was trying to explain to her why I did not want to post my 10-year-old's video on YouTube and why I was uncomfortable with that. And then, of course, my husband came home and said, oh, what's the big deal? It's adorable. Let's do it. And then we couldn't even post it because she used a song that had copyright issues. And that was a great conversation, right? It was from beginning to end talking to our kids about that. So I don't know if I really answered your question. I think I'm resistant because I really think that we need to give the older folk a little bit more credit, and that, you know, the only suggestion that I would have is, especially with social media, and I tell this to parents when I work with them, you need to be a part of their world. So if your kids are on Twitter or Instagram, get on Twitter and Instagram, not to follow them, but to understand it, like to be able to communicate with them about it. Social media is a lot of their social life. You know, they do not have an open social life that we used to have growing up. You know, they're not, even young kids are not playing after school. They're very overscheduled. They're very structured. So social media is their unstructured time. So just like you would want to understand what your kids are doing after school, you want to understand what your kids are doing and why they like social media. So I would say the really important part of all of this is conversation with your students and with your kids about all of this.
Right. Kind of going back to specific things or policies that Namely has put in place, I know that Namely is responsible for the creation of a policy document known as the Core Principles of Media Literacy Education in the United States. Can you tell us about the document and how it's used?
Yes, absolutely, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I appreciate that. So there's a couple of things that I would say our organization is known for, and one of them is our core principles document. And that core principles is we're actually currently in the process of updating it because we've noticed that, like I referenced before, because there is such a move to creation and being media makers, we really want to look at the core principles again to assess if we're really addressing that part of media literacy in the most effective way. But our core principles is certainly the, for lack of a better phrase, our most popular go-to on our website, and teachers use this all of the time. So essentially it lays out the kind of 6 principles that we look at, and I'll read a couple, and if we want to talk about it, but one of them is simply that media literacy education expands the concept of literacy, so that we're not just talking about reading and writing, we're talking about all forms of media, and that's a core principle. That we are also looking at media literacy education requiring inquiry and critical thinking about the messages we receive and create, so that there's a kind of an element of skepticism, is like we're really analyzing what messages we're receiving and now what messages we're sending out. And that, one of our core beliefs and one of our core principles is that media literacy education really the engagement that participants get from media literacy education is actually essential for democratic society, especially as technology and media really expand every aspect of our life. Media literacy education is an essential aspect of us keeping ourselves as a democracy. If you think of news literacy as an example, for people to really, really understand news literacy and understand what they're hearing in the news and how to analyze that, I think that's kind of a personal button for me, that the people that are still watching the news and actually believing everything they hear is a real problem in a democracy, right? You have to be able to analyze for yourself. You have to be able to take your own beliefs into consideration, and you have to take into consideration all the things that happen in order for those news stories to get on the front page or to get some time on a television show. So I think that's really important. And that, we are all part of a culture, and we function as agents of our culture, and that we recognize media is part of that, and that, we really embrace media. So our attitude is really about empowerment. We're not going to say turn off the devices. We're not going to say, we're not going to go into the limiting or protecting. We're really about media is here. Media is amazing. There's amazing opportunities that come with media. How can we educate people around it? How can we make sure that we're thinking effectively about it, so that we're really, taking advantage of the power of it without harm and without ignorance, really.
Sure.
Right. Of course, we are talking to Michelle Ciulla Lipkin. She is the executive director of the National Association for Media Literacy Education.
Yes. I would like to ask you more about the core principles. However, I have some additional questions. So in the meantime, where can people go to find those if they want to read more about the principles?
Oh, great. Thank you for asking that. You're so good at this. You go to namely.net, which is NAMLE.net, and it's our website, obviously, and there is a tab called Media Literacy Ed, and under that you'll find the core principles. You'll also, this might be of some interest to your students and your professors, we are also known for our Journal of Media Literacy Education. It's a peer-reviewed journal. It's open source. It's available to anyone. We get thousands and thousands of downloads for each of our editions, and it's a great resource for people in the academic world that are interested in media literacy education. We also have information about privacy, about how media literacy education integrates with the Common Core standards, all that kind of stuff. There's also information about our conference. We do a biannual conference, which is another thing that we, the thing that's so interesting about media literacy is it's cross-discipline. So at our conferences, you will have higher ed professors, you will have English teachers, you will have science teachers, it's really an amazing, eclectic group of people that are interested in this topic. So our conference is really, really interesting because it brings together so many people, and we have another conference next year. So you'll learn anything you need to know. And then, obviously, if anyone wants or has specific questions, they can contact me directly or just, contact us on our website.
Excellent. Now, actually, the conference makes me think of the next question I have for you. Do you have, at these conferences, people from other countries, and where does the United States stand in comparison to other countries regarding its awareness of media literacy? Are we considered a media literate public? How would you characterize us?
I would say that's such a good question. So there is an incredible amount of work being done internationally around media literacy education. Canada, for example, is doing phenomenal work, and they have kind of a much more comprehensive media literacy education goals in their country. And there's a lot of amazing work being done in Europe. My board president, Sherry Hope Culver, who's a professor at Temple University, she is part of a UNESCO group that's an international media literacy group, and our conference next year will be partly this international group will be coming, and they're from all over the world. She's actually going to China this fall to work with this group. So there's a lot of amazing work being done. I would say that the issue that we have in our country is that media literacy work is being done in like silos, right? So it's happening really effectively maybe in one school here, in another school here, in a school district in this state. There isn't comprehensive media literacy education throughout our states, and that is an issue. So as we grow, as our organization grows, and now as more people start to pay attention to media literacy education, it becomes more apparent that there needs to be more kind of comprehensive national conversation about this. Now, one thing that I want to say is that there's been amazing progress being done, and one of the things that we are working with an organization called Media Literacy Now is passing state legislation about media literacy education. And as far as New York State goes, we actually have a bill at the New York State Assembly that is to change the state education laws to include media literacy education as a mandate, so that teachers are getting trained, getting the professional development that they need to be able to bring this effectively into their classrooms. So there's a lot happening, and there are bills in Massachusetts and New Hampshire and New Jersey. There's a lot of work being done. So I would say that in general, there in our country, just to sum it up, there is some amazing work being done in media literacy education. The issue is we need more of a nationwide conversation about it, and we need to kind of pull all our resources together to work together. And that, of course, is part of our job at the National Association for Media Literacy Education, is to be that umbrella to have these conversations. So we are moving in the right direction, but we need to continue to make this part of the national conversation.
Great. Well, Michelle, I could go on for longer, and I think I'll have to talk to you off air. But so just one more time for our listeners, where can they go to learn more about Namely?
Okay, so you go to namely.net, which is NAMLE.net.
Great. Excellent.
And please, feel free, again, to use that email to contact us and ask any questions. And this was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you guys wanting to talk about it.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, Michelle.
We do, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.